All right, well, hello everyone. Welcome to our Kinora online webinar, how to use your NDIS funding to help you achieve your travel and holiday goals. I'm Lisa, and we've got Tamina here as well. If you're a Kinora member, you would have seen us around as one of the coaches. We're always around to answer questions or to offer support. Now, if you're not a Kinora member, Kinora is a safe and supportive free online community where you're able to get support for your NDIS questions from NDIS coaches in our community of thousands of other NDIS participants, their families, support coordinators, a lot of people are on. And you'll also find service providers on our marketplace who are experts in their field. Hop on to Kinora and come say hello. And I'm really excited today because we do have two Kinora providers who are experts in supported travel. So we've got Peter from Clubmates and Yann from Supported Travel Experiences, STX for short. Okay, so I'll refer to that. I'll have them introduce themselves shortly, but just a bit of housekeeping as we start. Okay, so firstly, this is a recorded session. So at the end of this webinar, we will be posting the link to this video on YouTube. It will also be posted in our Kinora community. For all of you who've registered, we will email you a link. Watch it again, share it around. For the first time, I'm feeling really optimistic about travel again, although of course the airline prices are a little bit cost prohibitive, but it's something to really look forward to again. We'll be taking questions throughout the event. Okay, so if you just take a look at the top of your screen, there is a chat button. Please click on that now and the little chat section will show up on the right. And this is where you can put in your questions, introduce yourself, enter in your comments. We may not answer questions straight away, but there will be some time at the end and Tamina will be reading out your questions for us. Okay, so we can answer those. Tamina is co-hosting this webinar with me, but she will also be mainly helping me look after the chat because it's really hard to manage that and also talk at the same time. So finally, I'd like to make an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the country we're meeting on today, all across Australia, wherever you are, as we broadcast this webinar across the nation. We recognize their continued connection to the land and waters and thank them for protecting this coastline and its ecosystems. We pay our respects to elders, past, present, and future, to all First Nations people today. If you're just joining us now, and I know there's still a few people just coming on, this is an online webinar about accessing supported travel with the NDIS. Welcome to our Kinora webinar. So let's bring on our expert providers. They're already on. Let's start with you, Yann, from Supported Travel Experiences, STX. Tell us about yourself, STX, and what inspired you to get into this space of supported travel.
So my name is Yann. I'm the co-founder of STX. My background is not in travel, and I was in my previous career, I was working in the accessibility from an infrastructure perspective. So helping government to build and develop better places to be more inclusive and accessible. As part of my team, I had members with disabilities, and when we traveled across the country, every time there was something going wrong, I had bought a travel agency in the past, and I could see that there was not many options for people with disability to be able to travel freely. So STX is based on that mission to try to get everyone to be able to have the same opportunity to travel whenever, wherever you want, with whoever you want. So we established STX about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. We became an NDIS provider about 2 years ago. And now we help people traveling domestically and internationally. And they come to us, they tell us where they want to go and what they need, and we organize experiences, completely personalized experiences for them to be able to travel and experience the world.
Great. Wow. So setting up just before COVID, I noticed.
Yeah, we had plenty of time during COVID as a travel agent to think about, who else we can help traveling. but that was a great opportunity for us as well to develop that concept and test it as well. Yeah, there was a bit of a challenging 2 years, but travel is back.
Yeah, great. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Thank you, Yann. And our second guest is Peter from Clubmates. I love going through all of Clubmates' travel listings on Kinora. The pictures are so much fun. I actually also stalk you on social media, by the way. There's a lot of great photos of people on holidays, which I love to see. So tell us about yourself, Peter, Clubmates, and what inspired you to get into the space of supported travel?
Well, if you really ask, I bought Clubmates because I wanted to drive a bus. That was the real motivation. So forget all the other fluffy stuff. I just wanted to drive a bus around. Clubmates happened to have it. I'd never even spoken to someone with a disability before getting into this. Anyway, we exchanged the contracts, bought the business, and next minute I'm on trips taking people with a disability on holidays. And I've got to say, how much fun can you have with your pants on? It's fantastic. This is, well, I would have to have the best job in the world. I get paid to goof around and be an idiot. And we get to go to great places, enjoy ourselves. So we're a travel agent, same as Yann, travel agent, tour company, and we provide the supports. So we travel all over Australia, overseas. We do cruising, trains, coach trips. We've got a 40-seater coach. We tow a big trailer behind it with all of our bits and pieces. So if someone needs personal care, right through to hoists, commodes, we do behaviours, we do all the weird and wonderful stuff that gets thrown at us. We do both group and individual holidays. Clubmates now, we've been around for 32 years, so we're quite well established. I haven't had it that long. I'm not that old. I know I look old, but yeah, that's a whole different story. But that's what we do. And we have departures from every state. We got staff scattered all over the country, and we have our passengers coming from every state as well, which is really good. So that's us, Lisa.
Very cool. Hey, so Peter, I was just joking with you the other day, but so you've got departures going all over the place, and you're going on a lot of those yourself as well too, right? So how many trips are you thinking you might be going on this year?
Well, one I'm really looking forward to this year, I do quite a few. One I'm really looking forward to this year, we've got, it's called Bin's Track. So what we do, we're getting everyone into Melbourne or Adelaide, and then we take off from there. So Adelaide, because I said Adelaide because you guys are Adelaide based. So there you go. A tick for the Adelaide people. Woohoo! And then we go up through the centre of Australia, but not past Alice Springs. We bypass Alice Springs on the eastern side. We go pretty much right up to Tennant Creek, but it's all bush bashing all the way up. We turn around and come back down again. So it's all forward driving and camping and things like that. But yeah, the number of trips I do a year changes depending on what we've got coming. I like the long drives and things like that, but mind you, I'm actually going to the Philippines in about 3 weeks. So there you go. And I'm planning an India trip later in this year, but that's a whole nother story. But with the trips, it depends on what we need and things like that. I'm the backup coach driver, so I actually have a separate coach driver. He does a lot of the driving for us, but I tour lead, coach, drive, as well as do supports as well. So I could pop onto any trip. I'm like the annoying person that just keeps popping up.
Well, maybe you just the extra hand as needed, though, right? So that's very cool.
Are you looking for a job, Lisa?
maybe Peter. So firstly, okay, now I wondered what I want to do was just level set with everybody in the audience here. Okay, so firstly, the NDIS is not going to fund your holiday. This is a really great topic, but they're not going to fund your holiday. Okay, I'm just going to put it out there. We all agree. Okay, so let's start with you, Yann. How would you summarize the NDIS's role in supported travel?
That's a very short question for a very long answer. It actually depends on many things. It depends on personal circumstances. It depends on the disability and the conditions. It depends on the plans that the person has access to. It depends on how far they want to go. So it does require, and Peter and I are probably the same case, where it does require a lot of experience and expertise in having a conversation with everyone and a particular traveler to understand what their goals are, what their plans look like, and what they want to do, and then build an experience around that to maybe maximize their fundings available, considering that there is very often some out-of-pocket expenses. Flight are never covered, some accommodation part cannot be covered. It actually really depends. There is many other points that we can address.
And so, Yann, I guess you spend a lot of time with the actual participant, or whatever their family is, or whoever they want to do, like what they want to do, and interviewing them and understanding their goals, what they want to achieve with their travel. Yeah.
Yeah. So people, when they come to us, they're pretty excited because they want to travel, and they realize that someone can actually take the pain away of planning everything for them. So they contact us, and they have this grand plan about traveling around the world for 6 weeks or 8 weeks. But then what we do is we have a conversation. We have a form where they can provide all the details and nitty-gritty information that we need. But we also spend some time talking to their support team, the support coordinator, the plan manager, to really understand what are the goals, what can be funded through the plan, what cannot be funded, and have that. When we design it, it's a co-design with everyone. We have video calls or whatever communication channels the participant prefers. But it's a lot of conversation going on. And then based on what we know can be achieved through the NDIS and outside of the NDIS, then it's on our turn to actually do some research and put the itinerary together based on our conversations.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So Peter, your concept is a bit different than SCX. You've got trips and tours. I know you do individual as well, but so I'm just guessing that, like you were saying, you're going to get signups from all over the country to join one of your different trips. So, and there's going to be all sorts of different needs and stuff. How do you adapt your trip to ensure everyone is supported?
So what we do is we take, I notice there's a question there, and this might answer some of the part of that question anyway. I'll try and incorporate that in. So what we do is we have someone rings us up and says, look, I want to go on one of your group holidays. We fill in an application. If they're a new passenger, we fill in an application with them, so to find out what level of support they need. Where do they want to go? Basically, we do the same as a normal travel agent. So the same as like the message in here, Flight Centre, what it changes us. We do the same sort of process as them. Find out where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Fill in our application form as else, so then we know what level of support the person needs. Once you've done that, then we can book them onto the holiday. And we would do that for both our groups and individual holidays. If they live in WA, SA, NT, Vic, New South Wales, Queensland, wherever it might be, we've actually got a price as a departure point from the capital city there. And then we organise the logistics around there. Probably our biggest thing that separates us, because this says what's the main point that distinguishes us between someone like a main provider like Flight Centre. We look at how do we move someone with a disability, whether it's an intellectual, physical, or ABI, or any other psychosocial disability, how do we move them from point A to point B so they're not getting stressed, it's a smooth process, and it's enjoyable, because they are on holidays. So our travel agents are skilled in looking at that. So we'll look at how do we get the best flights. Sometimes if we're flying, in particular, overseas is an interesting one. So if you're flying out of Melbourne, you'll stop at Dubai or Singapore or some other place along the way. How long do we have to stop for? How long's the break between flights? So a lot of the flights are they'll stop for 2 hours, then they'll jump on another flight and you'll keep going. That doesn't work sometimes with our passengers. So we look at how do we make this a comfortable process to get from Australia across to, say, the UK. So we look at all those sort of things. Once we're in the UK, how do we get around the UK? What's our process? Because we're the ones on the ground doing the supports. How do we get them around? How do we get them from Heathrow Airport to the centre of London? Like, how do you physically do it? It's all right to go, I'll just get it. Yeah, as a group, like we put them in a taxi. Well, that's, that may or may not work. Do we have to charter vehicles, put them in a taxi? Do we get the tube? Like, what are we doing? And what level of supports do they need amongst all that? So there's a fair bit of detail that goes into what we do. And that's probably the biggest difference, even with Yann and myself, the difference between us and just the sausage factory travel agents. We look at the detail. The detail, as they say, the devil's in the detail. The more of the detail you've ticked off and you've cleaned up along the way, the better the holiday experience.
So then in terms of everyone's support needs, how many people do you normally take in a group?
We can go anywhere from 3 or 4 up to 40. It doesn't matter.
40 is a lot.
Yeah, that's why I've got grey hairs.
So 3 to 4 to 40, that's a lot of people. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm guessing that when you do get the group, so let's say like you've got one trip, like you've had that one that's going up to Tennant Creek or whatnot. I'm guessing that you're writing different and unique service agreements for each and every person who comes onto your trip then. Would that be right?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So everyone goes, oh, why don't you just give us a price for the travel and price for the NDIS? Well, it depends. It depends on what the person's claiming and what they want to claim from the NDIS, what line items they're claiming from. So that has a bearing on the out-of-pocket expense for the passenger versus the NDIS claim. So yes, it depends on what level of support do they need? Are they a one-on-one right through to, are they a 1 to 5? Like what level of support? What level of support do they want? It's not even what they need. Sometimes it's what they want.
Yann, do you have, from your experience there, how do you assess all that and how do you break down the NDIS component and, and the out-of-pocket component?
Yep. So what we do is we have 2 invoices. We have what we call a travel invoice, and all of our costs, including supports, everything goes on that travel invoice. We go to the NDIS. What can we claim, or what's the person want us to claim? We'll claim as much as we can, and we take that, we deduct that off the travel invoice. The passenger pays the balance of the travel invoice, and we claim the NDIS. For planning meetings, I've just seen a message pop up. Do we contact us to go through the planning process as well? Because we do quotes for plans. That's a good one. I'm looking at the questions. That's all. I got questions popping up.
Maybe you should. Maybe you should click the. Why don't you unclick the chat button? So because I know
I might have to unclick it. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. Chat.
I know. That's what happens to me too. But Yann, why don't you talk a little bit about how how do you assess the needs and how do you separate the invoicing and all that?
Yeah.
So we have. Oh, sorry, that's Yann. Sorry.
Yes.
I'm getting carried away. I'm just getting excited. I love this stuff.
All good, Peter.
Yann here. Well, first we have those discussions very early on to understand whether the participant has access to their own funding that they want to provide to complement the experience, or they just rely and they expect the NDIS to cover for everything. Then once we get that understanding, we can start putting an experience together. If the participant doesn't have an excess funding that they can provide and they rely on the funds, we might have to find something a bit closer to their home, a bit shorter for them, with a bit less activities. It actually depends, but considering that flights are never really covered by the NDIS, if they want to fly somewhere, they're going to have to provide that as an out-of-pocket expense. But when we're clear on what part of the experience is actually will be covered by the plan and is not covered, we are very similar to Peter. We have a quote where it's very clear of what costs are allocated to the NDIS funding, what costs will be out-of-pocket expenses. And then we go to, if there is a plan manager, we go to the plan manager and we request availability of funding and securing the funding for these trips. When it's validated by the plan manager, what we do is we request the out-of-pocket expenses to be paid upfront, and any cost that will be covered by the plan will invoice directly the plan manager after the trip is completed. So the participant doesn't have to worry about providing those funds up front and getting refunded later, unless you're a self-managed participant, where you can pay up front and you can get a refund after the fact.
So I think you made a really interesting point there, Yann, and maybe Peter, we'll just maybe have a discussion together here now. So basically, everyone, I want to talk about how the whole point about NDIS paying for your supported travel, it can seem a bit risky, right? And it's also because it is travel, it can be a high cost. So I think I'd like to talk a little bit about how do we de-risk it. And I think part of it is the planning process? Like, how do you plan on a trip, and how do you, do that? So maybe Peter, we will start with you. Yeah, how does a process all start with you, and how do you ensure that the funds are available?
Well, you got to risk it to get the biscuit, as they say. So there you go. First thing to do is, number one, work out where you're going to go. Once you've got that organised, ask companies like ourselves for a quote. Once you've got the quote, then I would always advise send the quote back through to your plan manager if you're self-managed. Maybe speak to LAC or things like that. But I would always get someone to just maybe have a look at it. If you're going into a planning meeting, I would strongly suggest that you should have a quote from companies like us, so you can provide them to the NDIA, because everyone knows the NDIA loves paperwork. They can't get enough of paperwork. They enjoy it. They get a kick out of it. So give them the paperwork so it shows what the travel portion is, what the NDIS portion is. You make that a goal in their plan. And if the person's true, and also you've got to speak in the NDIA language or NDIS language, otherwise you don't get it through. Once you've done things like that, you generally do get funding for supports in your holiday, whether, do you want to use STA, or you're using, well, where you're pulling your money from, things like that. I think Lisa will probably go into that a little bit later. But where to get the funding from, so we'll just use sort of core supports basically, and we can claim it out of there. So, but you need to follow their processes, the NDA's processes, if you like, because that's probably then they tick boxes for you. If you try and step outside, then they get confused.
And also to add to that, sometimes you don't need to have travel as part of your goals. You can use travel to fulfill some of your goals around independence and being able to travel independently with your kids or independently with any support. It could be to help with mental health. It could be to access the community and participate to social events. It doesn't have to be stipulated, I want to travel. It's just being able to connect as well. And there is other means to use travel to achieve goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Yann, because a lot of people go, oh, but I don't have travel in my plan. I don't have a holiday in my plan. But you know what? We use social and community participation. Social and community participation can be for anything. It's about choice and control. So you've got to think about it in NDIS terms, not just in holiday or travel terms. So the social and community participation is a great one. Capacity building, you've got increased social and community participation. So there's a few line items you can utilise to enjoy a holiday.
Well, so let's stick with that then. So for example, when we're talking about the capacity building line items there, what were some examples, excuse me, what are some of the things that you've done with some of your clients that you were able to claim under those line items?
So a really easy one is increased social and community participation in capacity building, because they need a bit extra support along the way. We've got another one with budgeting. So there's budgeting line items, because there's also there's like a travel training as well. So there's things like that you can do, because if you're getting on and off an aircraft, well, what seat are you going to sit in? If you can't read, you can't write, well, how do you teach someone how to get on and off an aircraft? It's the same thing with getting on and off a bus, an aircraft. How do you get a taxi? It's just life skills.
So that's what you're saying. Yeah. So learning how to get on and off. Yeah, it will be part of learning learning about travel.
Yep. And everyone goes, oh, budgeting. Oh, that must be an accountant thing. Well, that's not an accountant thing. That's just like, if you've got your money, if you've got $50 and the T-shirt or the drink you want to buy is worth $10, well, how much will I have left over? Will I get change? So even if you don't understand money, wait there and get the change. Now with it post-COVID, how do you use a credit card? We've got a guy, Michael, who works for us, who's got a disability. And I said to his mum the other day, she always used to give him cash. I said, you can't do cash really. Not many people like cash. So now we're educating Michael, how does he use a card? So if he needs a PIN number, what's the PIN number? Michael will remember the PIN number. He taps it. If he needs a PIN number, he's got the PIN number. So it's all that educational type stuff. But now they don't see the cash. You go, hang on, if you spend all that money on this now, you're not going to have anything for that tomorrow. So the
Mm-mm.
budgetary thing is a really big thing. Yeah. So there's
Mm.
lots of line items sitting even in that capacity building that you can utilize. And it really does help you.
And Yan, how about yourself? What are the most common line items that you're using, or the types of budgets that you're using? And let's try maybe overseas trips for what you're working on, Yan.
Yeah, community participation, we do a lot. Overseas is bringing families together often, so it's how they connect with people. In terms of some of the funding that we use, there is a mechanism called, it's a line item called short-term accommodation. It works a lot more for domestic, obviously. Some of these costs can be claimed when you go overseas, but you have to be careful. But short-term accommodation is basically a daily allowance that can help with covering costs for your accommodation, your support, your activities. There's a big asterisk in terms of what can be claimed and funded, but it's a daily allowance that allows you to get away from your home or your support team and building this independence. There is some restriction around how you use short-term accommodation. You can only claim 28 days per year. It cannot be claimed more than 14 days in a row. So there is some restriction about how to use it, but it's quite flexible about how participants can use and package up a holiday using those line items as well.
That's really cool. I think the STA thing it's what's really amazing about it now is it's in core, and the flexibility that it has now allowed means that it is really very much choice and control, because it used to be for respite.
Yeah.
But you're totally right. Like, going on a bit of a holiday is a way to kind of just clear the air, be in a different environment and see things in a different perspective, which really respite kind of helps as well too, in some sense, right?
Yeah, and you don't have to have STA in your plan, but I always put a caveat when we discuss those with the participants is when you use STA funding that comes out of your core, that means that amount of money you won't be able to use it for other services that was part of your plan. So it's okay to use that funding, but make sure that it doesn't compromise to other services and product and services that you expect from your funds.
That's a really good point, because a lot of people are dependent on, say, support workers, which is what core is used for as well. And you're right, STA can be very expensive. Like, accommodation can be very expensive, and that can eat into your core budget quite a bit. And that's what you're saying, isn't it? We have to manage the budget responsibly and ensure that you have enough to support you for the rest of your plan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't consider that. They go, I'm just going to use STA. And you go, hang on, but you've got a 2-year plan or your 1-year plan. And all of a sudden they've used this big chunk and they don't have enough money for 2 years or even their 1-year plan. So you do need to budget your money correctly, and you need to be on top of. We deal with a lot of house staff. A lot of the house staff don't see the NDIS budgets necessarily. They go, oh, just book this or just book that, or family go, just book this, just book that. Yeah, but do you have the funding there for it to cover that? Because otherwise, you know what? The person's got to pay for it, because we can't do it for free, unfortunately. We'd love to, but we can't.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, Peter. It's like, so again, this is like working with, it is like it's like working with a flight center, but more specialized. And so there is actually a cost involved. And so what line item is this cost typically getting you guys involved?
So with, look, most of ours are social and community participation. So they sit in core supports.
Oh, okay.
STA, yep, core supports. So that's really straightforward.
Oh, no, sorry, Peter. What I mean is, like, to help us figure out the trip itself, all that legwork and all that stuff. Yeah. How is that charged?
So that's all part of our quote. We just do it anyway. So we don't, we just like you guys. So we just do it.
So it's not a separate line item.
So we just do it, No, we've got processes in place. So it's not a major headache. If someone wants us to put something, we'll put something together. If you want to take it away and do it yourself, we can do that too, but you will get charged for our time. But if you go, no, Clubmates, you just do it, you've quoted it, you do it, you sort of staff it, because we do the staffing, we do everything. Cool, no worries. There's no charge. That's all part of it. If you go, no, I want to take away and I want to do all the bookings myself, you've done the research, I want to do the bookings, then we charge you for the work we've done.
Okay, gotcha. And how about Yann, yours as well? How does that work for you?
Yeah, for us, there is always some research that needs to be done. We always plan, because we want to provide personalized experiences. There's always a lot of work involved. Our fees are generally covered by NDS planning.
Right.
It could be on the core. It could be incorporated into the STA if there is funding available there. We can also put into capacity, community, innovative community participation. We've got access to different ways, but no, generally our fees is covered by the plan.
Is baked into it. Okay, great. That's good to know.
Look, Lisa, with that work, there is a lot of work involved. I'm sure Yann is the same as what we are. To find accessible accommodation or suitable accommodation or flights or, meals or whatever else, it can take a long time and it's expensive. Sometimes it's phone calls across the other side of the world. Sometimes it's emails, but it can be a slow, drawn out process. So, yeah, it can be slow and it can be expensive to do that. So that's why obviously we pass on costs.
Well, of course, and it can be difficult. I mean, do you have an example, Peter? Tell us a little bit about a trip, maybe one of, the more difficult trips, or like, ones where you had to organize a lot of things.
So we had a guy, and I think I've told you guys about it, but I went to South Africa. And this guy, I met him just at a normal travel show. I met his mother at a normal travel show, walked past, and she goes, great, but you couldn't do my son. He's in a wheelchair. He's 6'4", probably about 120 kilos, so pretty big guy. And she said, oh, but you couldn't do my son. I said, yeah, we can do that. No worries. So she was going to send 2 of her house staff with him to South Africa to do, because he wanted to do a safari through South Africa. And I said, well, you can do that, but you've got to look at what if something goes wrong? What's your backup? The backup with us is I pull out my big fat credit card and it gets fixed, because that's what we do. That's the assurance that you've got. And my credit card is big and fat because it needs to be. So I said to him and his mum, I said, I would suggest you do a mini trip in Australia first. So he was in Sydney. He went Sydney, Brisbane, stop over intentionally in Brisbane, and then Brisbane to Darwin. 7 days playing around Darwin. Then we did the reverse because we wanted to get the stopover system happening. Then his next big trip was he went to South Africa. So he flew Sydney, Perth, Johannesburg. Great trip. But the planning around that is significant. So if something goes wrong, we've got all the backups in place. And then, what equipment do we need? Because he was a hoist commode. He needed everything going along with us. They don't have hoists in South Africa that we could just hire. So we had to take our hoist across. They had commodes, but everything's a little bit different. So you've got to look at all the processes that we need. And because, we're the ones on the ground, if it goes wrong, then we've got to wear it, both actually physically wear it and financially wear it. So we make sure the systems do work. We take another guy around the UK and Europe, same sort of thing. And you've got to look at how are you going to do this? There was one passenger, but he's in a wheelchair. So we had a hoist, commode, his 2 suitcases, his wheelchair, our 2 suitcases, because 2 staff. So we had 7 items that we had to get around with 4 hands. Mm-hmm. So you've got to work out how are you going to move this around? And they're the sort of things you've got to look at all the time. But look, that's what we do.
But I love that story about the South Africa one. So did he get to go to a safari?
Yeah, he's done it 3 times, a lunatic. Yeah, he had a great time.
With you each time? With you each time?
Yeah, he's gone with that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had a great time. Not a hell of a nice guy, great guy. And look, he was coming back on the first time. We thought, oh, he's not going to do this again. He was in pain the whole flight home. And then his mum phoned me up when he got back, and she said, Peter, Stephen had the best holiday ever. I went, did you tell him about how much pain he was in coming back? She goes, oh, no, didn't worry about that. He just had the best holiday. He's just raving about it. So sometimes it's not about, what you think is right or wrong. It's what the passenger sees, or the participant, whatever you want to call them, as what's a really good trip. He had a great time. So he went back 3 times. So that's pain obviously wasn't an issue for him.
Yeah.
No, you got lots of great travel stories. And how about you, Yann? In terms of planning a trip and the things involved, tell us a bit of a story of one of your clients, the trip that they took.
Yeah. more and more people are coming to us with plans to go overseas. So we do a lot more overseas than we anticipated this year. But end of last year, we helped a participant going back to Cyprus, where all of his family was. He hasn't been there for about 30 years because of his condition and disability. But he has complex requirements, and he always have 2 support workers full-time with him. So we had to organize flight to get there, managing pressure management, balance management, and etc. Finding the right accommodation for a month over there, finding an accessible vehicles for him to go on with his power wheelchair, finding support workers over there, finding equipment to hire, special beds, to be I don't really speak the language over there, but I managed to find.
Why not? What's going on? You're European, are you?
Yeah,
you all spoke the same language.
I'm learning it at the moment. It was all the complexity. It took a long time to coordinate everything. That person left with 3 support workers as well. We had to find extra support workers for activities in Cyprus. It was pretty complicated, and it took a lot of effort to get that happen. But the joy of that person sending us picture of him and his family after 30 years was just priceless. It couldn't get better than that.
That's amazing. So the thing about that's interesting though, Yann, is that unlike Peter, who it's an escorted trip, like the trips are being taken by these guides. Yep. Yann, you're sending people off on their own trip, and that in itself, like, how do you make sure that the support worker you hired will show up, and what happened? Like, do they have a 24-hour phone line that calls you when you're in bed that, hey, this didn't work out?
Well, this is why, and Peter as well, we have got lots of gray hair. There's lots of things that can go wrong, and we actually plan for everything that can go wrong. If there is special treatment, we find nurses that are in the area of the destination that could support in case of. We vet all the information. We're not sending people and just booking online and say, hey, here you go. That's where the effort of planning comes together, and we do spend a lot of time making sure that everything's right. We do validate a lot, so we do spend a lot of time communication with the participant, but also the support team, the OT, the service coordinators, to make sure that everything we put together is actually great. We do generally add a contingency in our quote, just because when you travel, never perfect. Things can go wrong, and often go wrong. So we have a contingency allowance that we incorporate in the quote that is completely transparent. We don't charge it if we don't use it, but at least we have some funding available just in case something happens. Our credit card, it might not be as big as Peter's one, so we need to do that contingency up front. But we do a lot of risk management and risk mitigation strategies before, especially with overseas trip. We do that a lot more.
Oh, great. So it sounds like there's a lot of planning. So what's the lead time you think that our participants should have when they're starting to plan their travel?
That's a good question. When we get into that space, we thought, that involves a lot of planning, a lot of research. We'll have plenty of time to put a quote together. And it's actually worse than the other travel agencies. It's like the turnaround is like, they call us and say, I've got some funding available. I want to go in 3 weeks' time for 2 weeks in New Zealand. I'm like, sure. So we do make it happen. But look, people are generally, they understand the complexity when it comes to planning. Often people don't travel on their own. It's a family trip, so it's 2, 3, 4 people. It can take months of preparation. Some people come to us with requests for 2024. People tend to also realize that they have extra funding and they could use it. So it's sometimes, especially for the domestic trips, people come to us at the bit last minute. But look, we accommodate for everything. Our mission is really to get people traveling and connect wherever we can. So we'll do it all over we can to make that happen.
Right. And Peter, for you, because like you do have tours, like, you know, you must get a lot of last minute applications to join a tour, whatever. Like what would you say is the best period of, you know, how much lead time should we allow for?
Some trips we've turned it around in 24 to 48 hours. It depends on how quickly can they pay the money and if we have accommodation and staffing. So some trips are just all the world falls into a line and the moons are perfect and things like that, and we can turn it around. But I would think the individual trips, they do have a longer lead time because they want to do something very specific. So yeah, we do take a little bit longer to get them organised and get them going. The group trips, not so ugly. Saying that, it's always nice if you book it early. I can tell you now, because then there's no pressure on anyone to get it organised. And the more complex the disability, the earlier you should book it. If it's just a very mild intellectual disability, mobile and everything else, yeah, it's not a really big headache. But when you get to complex, they go, well, I need an active night and I'm in a wheelchair and I've got to be turned at night and I've also got behaviours and things like that. Then all of a sudden, the support workers, we need to find the right support worker to go on that trip, as well as we might need hoists, commodes and all that sort of stuff. Now we've got to find 2 support workers because they're an active night as well. So that takes a bit longer. And then you've got to find, have you got the right accommodation? Generally, our accommodation, we always book it so it's got an accessible room. But if that room's already booked, may or may not be. That's why I say if the moons align and everything's perfect, it can be quick, but the longer the lead time, the better. Internationals, absolutely longer, because especially at this time, because you need time to actually look at it and go, right, what can we do? How do we get through the various borders? Australia's not such a big headache, but yeah, cruising, again, you want a longer lead time because cabins are booking out really quick, really quick.
Yeah, the problem with cruising is the accessible cabins are taken by older generations, and there's they're the first one that gets out. So if you don't plan 12 months in advance, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do train trips, so if you go on the Great Southern Rail and you go from Sydney to Perth, Adelaide to Darwin, no, their lead time is 6 to 9 months. That's how long they're booked out for at the moment. So just craziness. Go to Spirit of Tasmania. Spirit of Tasmania, I'll give you one. We try to get our Merc across there, our Mercedes Sprinter across there. We could get it over, but we couldn't get it back till June this year. Just lunacy. So that's why you're going, you'll do a long.
So it was stuck in Tasmania, was it? Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Now I've got like heaps of other questions, but you know what? I can see the audience has heaps of questions, so I'm going to stop there because I was gonna talk about how, you know, self-planning and like it's how difficult it is going to Booking.com or Expedia to book your own. But hey, you know,
do it through us. You know, what are you doing about, Ben? Just do it through us. Look at us, a couple of good-looking roosters.
You can't guarantee the supported travel if you book it yourself, right? And also like just again like the risk planning. So okay, Tamina, we've had lots of pings of the questions. So Tamina, let's get you to send the questions over to us now.
Yeah, we just have one great one come in, which I just want to cover because I think a lot of people would like to know. Sharon's is asking, what's the best worded goal you have seen to satisfy the NDIS to consider funding for supporting travel?
I want to go on a holiday. It's really easy, that one, because that's the goal. Then don't forget, from that goal, then they go, what are you going to do to achieve that goal? So, and then from there, you get the quote off Yann and myself, and then you submit that when you're doing your planning, because that is, if that's your goal, that's your goal. Your goal doesn't have to be difficult. It can be a really simple goal. I've got a guy who wants to learn how to drive. And then the NDIS have looked at it because I've been following Ben around with this. The NDIS have looked at how does he get in the driver's seat so that whilst they don't pay for him to drive, but he does need supports in there. He needs a special car with dual control pedals and things like that. So they look at that sort of stuff. Same thing with holidays. So don't get scared off by it. Just put a simple goal in.
And Yann, actually, you mentioned before too that you don't necessarily have to have an exact travel goal, right? You can work around it.
Yeah, well, if in a family there is someone with disability, you can ask as a goal to be able to travel as a family independently, and then it can eventuate in a holiday. It doesn't have to be a holiday. Obviously, if you have a holiday, it cannot be, it's quite clear. But it doesn't have to be a holiday. It could be something else where traveling could be using to achieve that goal. I don't have a specific wording.
Like, so for example, like broadening horizons, or
Yep.
getting, Peter, I think you shared a story the other day about, maybe getting past some anxiety around crowded places or whatnot.
Yeah, I've got a few of those ones. So, what I was going to say with the holidays, instead of using the word holiday, you go in your goals, you can write down, yeah, it's a holiday, but you also want to put in, I want some respite, because they love that word. That's a really funky word. It's an NDIS loving word. They can't get enough of that sort of stuff.
But if it's also a travel to connect with relative or friends,
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go.
you can just
Reconnection. Absolutely.
Or spend. There are some activities in some part of the country that are not available. If you want to do some diving and you're based in Melbourne, well, you might just say, I want to do some diving on the reef, and then you have to get there because you can't really dive in the reef in Melbourne, so you have to travel to get to experience that. So there's different ways to be able to.
You can dive in Melbourne if you've got a really thick wetsuit because it's bloody cold down here.
But yeah,
I go spear fishing. I don't have a wetsuit. It's all right.
All right, we've got lots of questions, Peter. So let's get to the next one.
All right, go. Otherwise, I'll talk.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Thanks, guys. So Simon's asking about cruises and STA. If you guys just want to shed a little bit of light on that area, that would be great.
Yes.
I think a lot of people would like to know.
Yes.
I'll start.
You go, Yann.
We have been able sometime to actually claim the cruise experience as an STA, just because an STA is a combination, as I said, about accommodation, support, meals, and activities. When you go on a cruise, you have accommodation, and the support can come with you. Or you can have support in the cruise. The meals can be included. Sometimes you're allowed to be able to use the STA funding. Again, it depends on how long is the cruise and how far you go and the cost of the cruise, because it's a daily allowance, so it has to fit within the threshold that the NDIS guideline provides. But it could be considered as a STA.
Great. Peter, did you have more to add to that?
We've had some people go, no, I'm not doing a cruise, not going to use STA. The plan managers said that, and that's fine. But then we've got others going, yeah, whatever, that's fine. I would always suggest go back to your plan manager. Anyone that's on agency managed, I don't know why someone will do it. Yeah, it's not going to happen. I would always go for plan managed. Plan managed, you can deal with the plan manager much easier. They probably know the legislation better than the agency does, to be honest with you. So, well, no, this is a plug for plan managers, but it's a really good way of getting that funding through. So I always suggest people with any STA, go back to your plan manager. Are you comfortable? Do you agree that this is the right way to spend your STA, and go from there? Doesn't matter if it's a cruise, a land-based, a train, overseas, it doesn't matter. I would go back to the plan manager.
And I think one of the things that they would ask too is, and it's just like what Yann said, like depends on the length of the cruise or whatnot, and the cost per night, for example. But is it value for money? And actually, cruising prices have gone down a lot, so it is actually can be comparable to STA these days, right? Some of them, and some of them are not. And so, yeah, I think it's a really good point, Peter, about checking with your plan manager or your LAC or whatnot. So. Tam, another question? Oh, sorry, you're saying.
No, I wanted to say actually, cruises have been used in our experience for participants who are not used to travel. It's kind of a safe environment, so they only go to one place, and then nowadays the ships are actually very accessible. There is like accessible lift, there is ramps everywhere. You can bring your wheelchair. They have accessible showers, accessible cabins. So it makes it a bit. Sometimes we suggest to look at cruise when it's the first time they want to travel. because it's a bit of a safe environment.
Can I just,
That's
another thing on cruise, from a holiday point of view on a cruise,
Mm.
I did a cruise late last year, and if you've never been on a cruise and you're in a wheelchair, those cabins are pretty good.
Yeah.
I actually had an accessible cabin. I was going on with my elderly parents, and they said, well, we don't want to be in there, we want to be in. So they took my cabin and I took theirs. I had the accessible cabin, and those accessible cabins are very good. Very good.
Very thoughtful. Good. Tam, next question.
Yeah, just want to let everyone know as well, there are a couple of members wanting to ask about your services. We will reach out to everyone personally, so I don't want you to feel like we're leaving your question out. We will get a response for everyone, but I do want to bring up the ones that I feel like a lot of people would be interested in. And Mandy has just asked about, if I bring a support worker from home, what would the NDIS cover or pay for?
Good
Supports
question.
only. Supports only.
Yeah.
And the other problem that you found, so it's interesting this, I've just spoken to Fair Work Australia about this as well. And they said they and VECI, which is a Victorian Chamber of Commerce, because I do the employment contracts for Clubmates Travel, they said that their problem they have is that support worker gets paid an hourly rate for, say, 6 to 8 hours. They actually work because when they're away, you don't stop. So there is no switch off unless you go to bed when you're asleep. Even when you're asleep, you know what? If someone wakes up during the night and needs help, get up, because that's how it is. That is the harsh reality of on-tour work. So if you look at your support worker, you bring your support worker along, if they're not prepared to do that, or you don't have some form of agreement saying this is the level of supports that I need and I want and I demand, you could end up paying a lot more. So the cost for the support worker, it can be a variable.
That's a really good point. And actually, we were talking to my plan manager about this, and they were saying that a lot of people forget that, yeah, the support worker comes on, and actually they will consider that they're on duty for that extended period. So you've got to work
24
that out.
hours for 24 hours. So what are you going to pay them for 24 hours worth of supports? And don't forget, you're following the awards. So it's not what the NDIS are going to pay. You're following the award rate. So forget NDIS, because that's a sideline.
For us, when participants want to travel with their own support worker, we get confirmation from the support coordinator or the plan manager of what is the current support ratio that they're on. It's part of the service agreement that the support that they will receive is actually based on the number of hours that is expected to be. If the participant wants more, then we find more support workers locally generally. So wherever they go, we find local support workers that can support as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really good point. And someone mentioned there too, yes, it's true. The price arrangements or price guide is the maximum, but it really, you're gonna have to determine that with your support worker, because they may have an expectation with you, right? So
they might so they've worked their first 8 hours at the agreed rate. Every hour after that, they're going to go, hang on, well, after 2 hours, I'm a double pay. And if I go
so you have to check
for another
that.
5 hours after that, you're going to be paying me triple pay because I don't stop. Are you prepared to pay that? Because the NDIS is, like you said, is a max rate.
And so, Yann, you made an interesting point there too, where in fact you would suggest maybe getting local, if you're going overseas, getting local support workers there. Okay. And so now getting, so if you're flying international, like you're saying, the example of the going to Cyprus, they got a local support worker, and that would be local funds that they would be paying. Yeah. And then how would they be able to claim that back on the NDIS?
So we contract the support directly, and the support is covered by the plan. So it's part of the experience. And as long as the overseas cost of support is not more than the threshold, then it's fine. Otherwise, they would have to pay the extra cost. The benefit as well of using local support workers is they can also become a local guide, and take the participants and through the town and the local cafes and avoiding the spots that are not accessible. So there is some benefits as well. It's a bit harder for us to find the right skill set and support workers, because support workers is an Australian name, so it doesn't be equivalent to other countries. So finding the right skill set in the countries is a bit hard, but we have partnerships across the world with organizations locally that can provide support.
That's a really good point. And the local support worker will also know like the health system or the, everything that's happening in their local area that you might not know.
And they speak the
That's a
language.
really good. And they speak the language. Exactly. Okay.
And
now
you can
I
have a
know
lot of
we're
fun
getting.
with them too, actually.
Mm.
We've had a lot of,
Well,
a guy in
of course.
Greece, I took him on he was just a guide. And so I employed him as a guide, and we had really good banter between everyone. It made it really fun, like a great fun to have a local who speaks the language and knows the area and all that. And we went for a bike ride, and we had a great time with this guy.
Very cool. Lots of wonderful stories. Now we only have 4 minutes, and I know there's heaps of other questions. So let's see if we can squeeze one more question in. Tam?
Yeah, I'm going to be cheeky and try and make it 2-part to answer 2. So Tanya's asking if a family member like her husband could be considered her support, which I think a lot of people would like to know. And if you have a companion card, does that make a difference in travel prices?
There's 2 questions, completely separate.
I know.
Yeah, for the family members, it actually depends on the circumstance and if informal support can be provided, or if the husband will act as a family member or as a support worker. So there is a distinction of that case, and based on that, there can be cost covered or not. Generally, when family goes around and they want to do a tour, the cost of the participant for that tour can be covered by the funding, but the expense for the others member of the family cannot be funded. If you sleep in separate rooms, obviously the other room cannot be funded. So there is a number of conversations, but we do have families traveling together. That's where they come to us. The second one, companion card. Yeah, there is a number of companion card in Australia, and they're not the same. And we, by experience, is depending on what companion card you have, you can have discounted experiences. Some of the flights can be discounted as well. Actually, it just depends.
Yeah. So I think this is, Peter, you don't have any more to add to that?
Yeah, I would say the companion card, we price ours up with the companion card in mind. So the companion cards are nothingness. We asked for it because when we go and pay for services or prove who you are, cruises, for instance, bring a companion card, bring some ID, because they won't let you on the boat now unless you have photo ID. So companion cards are really good for that sort of stuff. With the family as support worker, no.
Yeah. So I think this is the thing I wanted to put out there is that, look, I mean, you guys are running great, and you're, NDIS registered businesses, and so it's important that you're following the guidelines and you're doing everything possible in your business to ensure that although you are trying to enhance choice and control, it is very much about ensuring that the funds won't be rejected either. Yeah. So, okay, well, so we're at time. Yann, Peter, thank you again for being our guest for this segment. Really, really great discussion and lots of questions. I've learned so much about this interesting topic, and I'm really excited to see that you guys exist to make travel and holidays possible for those living with disability. What I love is that, like I said before, that the NDIS is there, and you guys are providers who are innovating in this space to help people push the boundaries of choice and control and do things differently, see the world differently, right? So thank you for your insight, wisdom, and advice, and passion, guys. So much passion.
Oh, we're passionate, all right. We're like the kings of passion.
You are. You're oozing out. So now this video is going to be loaded on YouTube tomorrow and an email be sent to all you guys so you can watch it again. Now, we always say that this webinar doesn't have to stop here. There's a lot more questions. We're going to get back to all of you individually. Hop onto Kinora if you've got more questions. If you're not a member, join for free. We are a supportive online community, okay, to help you through your NDIS journey. Our coaches are on hand to answer questions, but of course, Yann and Peter will be on hand too. We've got them on speed dial, something say, or speed type, and they've been great. They've answered questions, so they've been available. Now, next week, we have another really great webinar about the basics of navigating the NDIS. It's perfect for those who are new on the NDIS, or if you need a bit of a refresher, or if you're a service provider, it's really great for you to understand what the journey is for your clients, and you guys clients, what they have to go through. Come join us next week. We've got heaps of resources to explain that loopy NDIS journey that you got to go through. Check it out. Our events section is also on our website. There's lots happening. Sorry, we're at time. I'm Lisa. That's Timina. We've got Yann and Peter, and thank you all for joining us. Hop on to Kinora. Come say hello.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, everybody.